A billionaire hosts a charity gala in Chicago. Unbeknownst to her, her new gardener is among the guests. Mistaken for a wealthy donor, he overhears a plot to embezzle charity funds and decides to gather evidence to expose the scandal. He discovers a fraudulent scheme that leaves everyone shocked. Jack Harris was kneeling, hands deep in rich soil, when the fluttering sound of paper caught his attention. Looking up, he spotted an envelope skimming along the driveway, pushed by a gentle spring breeze. Curious, he stood, brushed the dirt from his knees, and chased it down. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and clearly expensive, definitely out of place in the modest neighborhood of his small Chicago bungalow. Inside, a heavy cardstock invitation was addressed to a Jonathan Harrowsmith, but had mistakenly found its way to Jack's residence due to a postal error that confused his Harris with Harrowsmith. The invitation was for a charity gala hosted by Alice Turner, a name known to anyone in Chicago for her vast wealth and philanthropic endeavors. The event promised an evening of elegance at the Turner Mansion with the city's crème de la crème to raise funds for underprivileged children. Jack flipped the invitation in his hand, pondering. Jonathan Harrowsmith, he knew, lived in the opulent high-rise 2 blocks away, a man whose lifestyle was galaxies apart from Jack's world of perennial beds and shrubbery. The mix-up seemed like a simple mistake to correct, yet as he read the details of the gala, a wild thought took root. What if he went instead? It was a chance to see how the other half lived, an experience so far removed from his own life of toil and soil. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, Jack decided he'd attend the gala. After all, the invitation was an all-access pass into a world he had only ever glimpsed through the iron gates he so often trimmed around. On the evening of the gala, Jack stood before his modest wardrobe, the invitation lying on his bed. Opting for his best suit, a somewhat dated but meticulously cared-for navy blue ensemble, he prepared himself for the night. As he knotted his tie, a reflection stared back at him from the mirror, a man out of his depth but eager to dive into the unknown. Upon arriving at the Turner Mansion, Jack's breath caught at the sight. The mansion was a beacon of light, its windows aglow with golden illumination that spilled onto manicured lawns where sculptures loomed like silent sentinels in the night. A red carpet led to the main entrance, where guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos were greeted by name and with practiced smiles by the hosts. Stepping out of a cab, Jack walked up to the entrance, his heart pounding in his chest. He was announced unobtrusively by a butler who mistook his nervous clearance of the throat as the cue. "Mr. Harrowsmith," the butler declared as Jack stepped into the foyer. The grand hall was a spectacle, with crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light over the throngs of the city's elite. The air was perfumed with a blend of expensive colognes and floral arrangements, overwhelming Jack's senses accustomed to the earthy aromas of nature. As he navigated through clusters of laughing and chatting guests, Jack felt every bit the outsider. His eyes widened at the opulence displayed, art pieces that were surely worth fortunes, waitstaff circulating with trays of champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres that looked like tiny, intricate sculptures. Jack's discomfort grew as he became acutely aware of his borrowed elegance. Yet, he couldn't help but be fascinated by the spectacle. Attempting to blend in, Jack mimicked the casual yet reserved demeanor of the other guests. He accepted a glass of champagne, letting the bubbly liquid tickle his throat, and tried to appear engrossed in the artwork along the walls. It was during one of these moments, feigning interest in a particularly abstract painting, that he overheard a snippet of conversation that sounded distinctly out of place. "Make sure the transfers are completed by midnight," a suave voice whispered not far from him. The tone was hushed but urgent, a stark contrast to the carefree laughter around them. Intrigued, Jack glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of Michael Thompson, Alice Turner's trusted advisor. who was known as much for his business acumen as for his unscrupulous dealings. Rumors Jack had heard from gossiping clients. Michael's face was serious, his eyes scanning the room as if to ensure their conversation hadn't been overheard. Jack's initial thrill at infiltrating this extravagant event began to morph into a gnawing curiosity. What was Michael referring to? Was it just standard business or something more clandestine? With the seed of suspicion planted, Jack's evening took on a new purpose. He decided to stay near Michael, to observe, unwittingly stepping closer to a world of intrigue and danger far beyond anything his simple life had ever touched. As the evening progressed, Jack found himself increasingly out of his element. The opulent surroundings and the refined chatter around him were a far cry from the straightforward conversations and simple comforts of his daily life. He caught snippets of dialogue about vacations in far-flung locales, the latest in high fashion and stock market tips, all topics that were as alien to him as the gala had initially seemed. Jack's feeling of alienation wasn't just due to the topics of conversation. It was the ease with which these individuals wielded their wealth, their sense of entitlement to luxury and power, that made him acutely aware of his own modest upbringing and current standings. Each time he spoke, his accent, a slight Midwestern drawl polished by years of customer service, seemed to thicken, his words more pronounced against the cultured tones of the gala's attendees. Trying to shake off his discomfort, Jack decided to focus on the people rather than their wealth. As he observed more closely, he began to see cracks in the veneer. There were subtle signs of strain, tight smiles, quick glances exchanged, the clenching and unclenching of finely manicured hands. It was clear that this world was not without its own pressures and insecurities. Determined to not let his outsider status completely isolate him, Jack struck up a conversation with a kindly older woman who seemed as out of place as he felt. She introduced herself as Mrs. Eldridge, a retired schoolteacher who had been a beneficiary of one of Alice Turner's education grants. She spoke with a soft kindness and a spark in her eyes that reminded Jack of his own grandmother. From Mrs. Eldridge, Jack learned more about the charitable work that funded nights like these. It was a sharp reminder of why these galas existed beyond the glitz. They generated funds that did genuine good. It tempered his judgment, reminding him of the complexities of wealth, how it could be both a force for good and a mask for less noble deeds. As their conversation wound down, Jack excused himself, his thoughts swirling. He was here under false pretenses, yet he felt a responsibility to understand this world, not just judge it. This resolve fortified him, giving him a new lens through which to view the night's unfolding events. Jack's newfound resolve led him deeper into the throng of gala attendees. As he mingled, the initial thrill of the opulent setting had worn off, replaced by a keen observer's curiosity. It was this curiosity that drew him near a secluded alcove where he stumbled upon a hushed conversation that would alter the course of his evening. He recognized Michael Thompson immediately, his sharp suit and sharper gaze cutting a distinctive figure. The man he was speaking with was unknown to Jack, a burly figure with a gruff demeanor that seemed out of place among the tuxedos and tailored dresses. Their conversation was low but intense. The words "immediate transfer" and "ensure discretion" piqued Jack's interest. Positioning himself behind a decorative fern, Jack strained to listen without drawing attention to himself. The details were sparse, but it was clear they were arranging some sort of financial transaction that seemed urgent and secretive. Michael's tone was authoritative, the other man nodding in agreement, occasionally interjecting with curt affirmations. As the conversation wrapped up, Michael handed the man an envelope, thick and likely filled with documents or cash. The exchange was quick, their hands barely touching, but the implications of what Jack had just witnessed were not lost on him. He felt a chill run down his spine as the realization dawned on him that he might have stumbled upon something illegal, possibly dangerous. Now, with actual evidence of something amiss, Jack faced a dilemma. Should he delve deeper into this mystery, potentially putting himself at risk? His sense of justice said yes. His instinct for self-preservation urged caution. Before he could decide on his next move, the crowd surged, and he was swept along to another part of the mansion. The brief physical distance from the conversation allowed him mental space to think. He knew he couldn't just ignore what he had heard, but how to proceed in this web of wealth and power, where he was an outsider with no real standing. His decision was made for him when he accidentally bumped into a familiar face from his neighborhood, Emma, a young journalist known for her investigative prowess. The chance meeting felt like fate, and with a newfound ally by his side, Jack felt ready to uncover the truth behind the overheard secrets. Standing amidst a throng of revelers, Jack shared his suspicions with Emma. Her eyes widened with interest, the gears of her investigative mind visibly turning as she considered the implications. "This could be a big story, Jack, but we need more proof," she whispered, her voice a blend of excitement and caution. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. He was no detective, just a gardener who had stumbled upon something potentially huge. The risks were clear. Diving deeper into this could expose him to real danger, not to mention legal troubles for impersonating someone else at the gala. Yet, the thought of turning a blind eye didn't sit right with him either. If there was corruption tied to charity, didn't he have a duty to uncover it? Emma, sensing his hesitation, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll be careful. Let's just observe for now. See if we can catch more of their conversation or spot any more suspicious exchanges," she suggested. Her confidence was infectious, and Jack found himself agreeing before he could second-guess himself further. Together, they moved through the halls, subtly keeping tabs on Michael Thompson. They watched as he mingled with high-profile guests, his charm on full display. Every smile, every handshake seemed calculated, masking the cunning that Jack had glimpsed earlier. As the night wore on, the gravity of the situation began to truly dawn on Jack. Here he was, a fish out of water, trying to navigate the treacherous waters of high society and corporate deceit. Each step he took into this world felt more daunting. Yet each piece of overheard dialogue, each covert transaction he and Emma spotted, only solidified his resolve. They were onto something significant, something that could potentially help a lot of people if the charity money was being misused. Buoyed by a sense of moral duty, Jack's initial trepidation slowly transformed into a steely determination. As he and Emma continued their clandestine observations, they became more adept at blending in, picking up on the nuances of conversation and the subtleties of body language that betrayed the facade of the gala's brighter smiles. Their breakthrough came when they overheard a part of another conversation between Michael and a different associate. This time, Jack managed to record a snippet on his phone, capturing Michael's voice discussing adjustments to the financial reports before the night's end. It was the concrete evidence they needed, but it was also more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. With the recording secured, Emma looked at Jack, her expression serious. "We've got something solid now, Jack. But we need to think about how we're going to use this. It's not just about breaking a big story. There are a lot of people who could get hurt if this money isn't going where it should." Jack understood the weight of her words. This was no longer just about exposing a corrupt official at a fancy gala. It was about ensuring that the charity's funds were used to help those in need, not line the pockets of the wealthy. The responsibility felt immense, but so did the potential for real change. As the evening drew to a close, Jack and Emma made their way to a quiet corner to discuss their next steps. They needed a plan, not only for how to proceed with their evidence, but also for how to protect themselves from potential backlash. As they talked, Jack felt a strange sense of camaraderie and purpose. He was no longer just a gardener. He was a guardian of truth, however unlikely that seemed. However, just as they were piecing together their strategy, a sudden interruption shattered their bubble of conspiracy. Michael Thompson himself approached, a polite yet chilling smile on his face. "Enjoying the evening, I hope?" he asked, his eyes sharp and probing. Jack felt a chill run down his spine, but he managed a nod. As Michael lingered, making small talk, Jack realized that their investigation had perhaps not gone as unnoticed as they had hoped. The real game, it seemed, was just beginning. As Michael Thompson casually conversed with them, Jack's mind raced. His palms sweated, and he felt the weight of the recorded conversation in his pocket like a stone. Emma's posture was relaxed, but her eyes were sharp, reading between the lines of Michael's too casual inquiries. "Actually, I was just admiring the art collection. It's quite impressive," Emma chimed in smoothly, diverting Michael's attention and giving Jack a moment to collect himself. Michael's gaze lingered on Jack for a split second longer before he responded to Emma, discussing a particular piece by a renowned artist that was up for auction later that evening. Their brief interaction ended when another guest called for Michael's attention. As he walked away, Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Emma glanced at him, her look one of both reassurance and caution. "That was close. We need to be more careful," she whispered as they watched Michael disappear into the crowd. Determined to not have their cover blown, Jack and Emma decided it was best to split up for a while to lower their profile. They agreed to meet in an hour by the garden terrace, a less crowded area, perfect for discreet conversations. As Jack wandered through the gala, his senses heightened. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His interactions were brief, his responses automatic, as his mind stayed focused on the ticking clock. The hour passed slowly, with Jack's paranoia growing. Each glance over his shoulder, each whispered word he overheard, seemed ominous. When he finally made his way to the garden terrace, the cool night air was a small relief from the stifling tension inside. Emma was already there, looking out over the manicured gardens bathed in moonlight. "We need to decide what we're going to do with the recording before the night is over," she said without preamble. Jack nodded, knowing the urgency of their situation. As they strategized, a shadow passed near a hedge not far from them. They paused, hearts racing, but it was only a waiter taking a shortcut. Their plan was risky. They would anonymously tip off a trusted contact at a major news outlet, hoping it would spur an investigation without leading back to them. As they finalized their details, the sense of imminent danger never quite left them. Each rustle of the leaves, each footstep on the gravel setting them on edge. Just as they were about to part ways again, Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned, ready to react, only to see Mrs. Eldridge, the retired schoolteacher he'd spoken with earlier in the evening. Her expression was one of concern. "I couldn't help but notice you and your friend seem quite troubled this evening, dear. Anything I can help with?" she asked, her voice low. Jack hesitated, but Emma spoke up, her instinct telling her they could trust Mrs. Eldridge. Briefly, they shared their concerns, not the specifics, but enough to suggest they were worried about some unethical activities tied to the charity. Mrs. Eldridge listened intently, her eyes narrowing in thought. "You know, I've had my suspicions about some of the financial dealings myself. Several of us have. If you have evidence, I know others who might help protect you." Her offer was unexpected but welcome. She quickly put them in touch with a few other long-time supporters of the charity who had noticed discrepancies in the funding allocations. These supporters were influential and respected within the charity community. and they agreed to meet with Jack and Emma immediately to discuss the situation further. In a quiet library room off the main hall, they gathered, a small group of determined individuals, each with their own reasons for wanting to preserve the integrity of the charity. They listened to the recording and reviewed the evidence Jack and Emma had gathered. There was a collective resolve in the room, a shared determination to not let the charity's mission be undermined by greed. As the meeting concluded, Jack and Emma felt a weight lift off their shoulders. They had allies now, people with the power and resources to take the right steps. The group agreed to proceed cautiously, using their positions to initiate a quiet investigation that would protect the charity's beneficiaries and bring the culprits to justice. Walking back into the gala, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a gardener who had accidentally received the wrong invitation. He was part of something bigger, a force for change in a world he had only just begun to understand. The last notes of the evening's music lingered in the air as the gala slowly wound down. Guests began to depart, leaving in their wake a quiet that belied the undercurrent of tension Jack and Emma felt. They had managed to slip away from the crowd to catch their breath and regroup after their narrow escape from Michael Thompson's probing attention. In the dim light of the garden terrace, Jack replayed the evening's events in his mind. The risk of exposure had never been so clear, nor the stakes so high. That was too close, he muttered, wiping beads of sweat from his forehead. Emma nodded in agreement, her face etched with concern. "We're playing with fire, Jack. If Michael suspects anything, he won't hesitate to burn us." Their plan to expose the embezzlement needed to be executed flawlessly. They decided to leave the gala separately to avoid drawing further attention. Emma would take the evidence they had collected directly to her contact at the local newspaper, while Jack would head home and lay low. As they parted ways, the weight of their endeavor settled heavily on Jack's shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow might be an observer, every noise a threat. He took a circuitous route, ducking into alleys and doubling back periodically to ensure he wasn't being followed. Finally arriving home, Jack's relief was palpable. He locked the door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a long, slow breath. He was safe for now, but the real challenge lay ahead. Tomorrow, the repercussions of their actions would start to unfold, and there was no telling how far the ripples would spread. The morning after the gala, the city awoke to headlines that shook the foundations of its elite circles. "Prominent businessman caught in charity embezzlement scandal," read the front page of the newspaper. The article meticulously outlining the allegations supported by the evidence Jack and Emma had provided. As the news spread, the reactions were immediate and varied. Some expressed shock and disbelief, while others nodded in grim vindication, having suspected corruption for some time. The story ignited a firestorm of discussions, debates, and demands for accountability. Meanwhile, Jack met with Emma and their newfound allies at a secluded coffee shop to discuss the fallout and their next steps. The group was buoyed by the public's response, which had been overwhelmingly supportive of their efforts to uncover the truth. However, they knew that the battle was far from over. Emma had received an anonymous tip that additional documents, potentially more incriminating than those they had already disclosed, were stored in Michael Thompson's office. Accessing them would be difficult and dangerous, but they could provide the smoking gun needed to ensure justice was served. With the stakes higher than ever, the group devised a plan. They would use the upcoming charity board meeting as a diversion to infiltrate Michael's office. Emma, with her press credentials, would attend the meeting under the guise of covering the charity's response to the scandal, while Jack would discreetly break into the office to search for the documents. The plan was risky, and every member of the group knew it. They agreed on strict safety measures and clear communication protocols. If anything went awry, they would abort immediately to protect their safety. As they prepared to set their plan in motion, Jack felt a mix of fear and determination. This was no longer just a mission to expose a crook. It was a fight for the integrity of an organization that had the potential to do so much good. The weight of this responsibility was heavy, but Jack was resolved to see it through, no matter the cost. The charity board meeting was tense, with members and stakeholders gathered around a large, ornate table, their faces a mix of anger, confusion, and betrayal. Emma sat among the reporters, her notepad ready, but her mind alert to more than just the official statements. She watched the board members closely, noting their reactions and the subtle exchanges of looks that spoke volumes about the underlying dynamics. As the board's chairperson addressed the room, vehemently denouncing the alleged misconduct and vowing to cooperate fully with any investigations, Emma's attention was partly on her phone, where Jack was updating her discreetly. He had made his way to the office building where Michael Thompson worked, using the chaos of the news cycle and the board meeting as cover. Meanwhile, Jack moved through the deserted corridors of the office building with a quiet urgency. His heart pounded as he approached Michael's office, the keycard he had borrowed from a contact sliding smoothly through the reader and granting him access. The office was a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the gala night. Here, everything was orderly, the decor expensive yet understated. Jack knew he had limited time. He went straight to Michael's desk, quickly rifling through drawers and cabinets. Files, documents, a laptop left open, a hurried search for anything that resembled financial records or communications relating to the embezzlement. Back at the board meeting, Emma's phone buzzed silently. Jack had found a locked file cabinet that seemed promising. He snapped a photo, sending it to Emma with a message, "Need advice on this? Looks important." Emma excused herself, stepping outside under the pretense of taking a call. In a quiet corner, she advised Jack on how to bypass the lock using a method an old journalist friend had once shown her. Tension was high as they both understood the risks of what Jack was doing. If he was caught, the consequences would be severe. Jack's hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Following Emma's instructions, he managed to open the cabinet. Inside, he found a stack of documents that looked exactly like what they needed. He quickly scanned them with a portable scanner connected to his phone, sending the files to Emma before carefully replacing everything exactly as he had found it. The documents were more damning than they had anticipated. They outlined not just financial misdeeds, but a network of corruption linking several high-profile figures in the city to the charity's funds. Jack's elation at the find was short-lived, however, as he heard the sound of footsteps approaching the office. He barely had time to hide under the desk before the office door swung open, heart pounding. He watched through a gap as Michael Thompson entered the room, another man in tow. They were discussing the scandal. Michael visibly agitated and vehement in his assertion that he would control the narrative no matter what. Jack remained motionless, barely daring to breathe as Michael and his associate conducted their meeting right above him. It was clear from their conversation that they were planning a counterattack, intending to discredit the allegations by any means necessary. After what felt like an eternity, Michael and his associate left, and Jack finally exhaled. He slipped out of the office and exited the building, his escape as narrow as could be. However, the day's triumphs were overshadowed by a troubling revelation. Emma, upon reviewing the scanned documents, recognized a connection that chilled both of them to the bone. Among the names linked to the financial schemes was a benefactor who was not only a major donor to the charity, but also a close family friend of hers. This betrayal hit close to home, complicating their next moves both personally and professionally. As they regrouped to discuss this new development, the weight of their discovery, the depth of the betrayal, and the potential fallout loomed large. They knew they were no longer just fighting institutional corruption, but confronting personal betrayals that intertwined with their lives in ways they had never anticipated. After the shocking discovery of the close family friend's involvement, Emma felt a profound sense of betrayal. The emotional toll was evident as she met with Jack to discuss their findings and the next steps. The coffee shop around them buzzed with the mundane chatter of daily life, a stark contrast to the gravity of their conversation. "Can you believe it? After all these years, to find out he's part of this..." Emma's voice trailed off, her disillusionment palpable. Jack reached across the table, offering a supportive hand. "I know it's hard, but we're in this to stop the corruption, no matter where it leads us," he said firmly. They knew the path forward would be more challenging with personal connections involved. They needed to tread carefully, ensuring their actions wouldn't unnecessarily harm those undeserving, but they also couldn't allow personal feelings to derail their pursuit of justice. The plan was to gather more evidence and bring it to the authorities. However, they agreed that Emma would confront the family friend first, giving him a chance to explain his side of the story. It was a risk, but it was a necessary step for Emma to take, both for her peace of mind and for their strategy. Later that day, Emma met with the family friend in a quiet park, away from prying eyes. The conversation was tense, with Emma presenting the evidence they had uncovered. The friend was visibly shaken, his explanations a mix of denials and admissions of minor wrongdoing. He pleaded ignorance to the larger scheme, insisting his involvement was limited to financial contributions that he believed were legitimate. Emma listened, her journalist skepticism tempered by years of personal history. After the meeting, she felt more confused than ever. Was it possible for someone to be so unknowingly involved, or was it merely a convenient excuse? Meanwhile, Jack focused on the broader implications of their discoveries. He arranged meetings with various contacts to bolster their case, gathering corroborative testimonies from people who had been unwittingly implicated or who had noticed irregularities over the years. The pressure was mounting, and so was the backlash. Both Emma and Jack found themselves subjects of subtle threats and not so subtle warnings. Their cars were vandalized, and anonymous messages urged them to stop digging deeper. It was clear that their investigation was causing waves in high places, and those implicated were beginning to push back. Jack and Emma met late one evening to assess their situation. "We're close to breaking this wide open, but it's getting dangerous," Jack stated, looking over his shoulder instinctively as they sat in his living room. Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. "We've come too far to back down now. Let's finalize our report and get it to the DA. After that, it's out of our hands." They spent the night compiling their findings into a comprehensive report, detailing the extent of the corruption and the network involved. The report was damning, a thorough piece of investigative work that could not be easily dismissed or ignored. As dawn broke, they sent their report to the district attorney's office, along with copies to trusted members of the press to ensure the story stayed in the public eye. Exhausted but determined, they prepared for the fallout, knowing that the next few days would be crucial. They were no longer just investigators or journalists. They were whistleblowers in a case that had grown larger and more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. The storm they had been anticipating was about to break, and they could only hope they were ready for it, as the sun rose over Chicago, casting a golden glow across the city. The calm before the storm seemed almost tangible. Jack and Emma had prepared as best they could, but nothing could truly ready them for the immediate impact of their actions. The report was explosive, making headlines within hours of its release, as local news outlets picked up the story and amplified the details of the corruption scandal. The district attorney's office announced a full investigation, citing the detailed evidence provided by Jack and Emma, The public outcry was significant. Citizens demanded accountability and reform, outraged by the depth of the deceit that had siphoned off millions meant for charity. At the heart of the storm, Emma attended a press conference held by the DA, where she asked pointed questions that highlighted the systemic issues revealed by their investigation. Her presence there wasn't just as a journalist, but as a key figure in uncovering the scandal, a role that brought her both respect and scrutiny. Meanwhile, Jack was back at his home, monitoring the situation from his computer. He received continuous updates from Emma and their allies, and together they watched as several high-profile arrests were made, including some of the charity's board members and business associates linked to the embezzlement. However, amidst the chaos, a deeper truth emerged. The documents Jack had discovered in Michael Thompson's office contained not just financial records, but also communications that hinted at a political angle to the corruption. This revelation suggested that the embezzlement was part of a larger strategy to influence city politics, making the stakes even higher than they had realized. The political implications of their findings added a new layer of danger to their quest for justice. Jack and Emma met to discuss the new development, realizing that they were now dealing with forces that had the power and motivation to push back hard. "This goes deeper than we thought, Emma. It's not just about dirty money, it's about control," Jack said, his voice tense as he relayed the latest findings to her. Emma nodded, her expression serious. "We need to be extremely careful from now on. This could get very ugly." They decided to reach out to a federal agency, hoping that bringing in a higher level of law enforcement would provide them with the protection and resources they needed to pursue this new lead. Their contact at the FBI was receptive and agreed to meet them to discuss the case further. As they prepared for this crucial meeting, both felt the weight of what they were about to do. They were no longer just fighting local corruption, but challenging a network that could have national implications. The danger was real, and both understood that there was no turning back. The meeting with the FBI was held at a secure location, where Jack and Emma presented their additional findings, including the political connections and planned manipulations. The agents were attentive and concerned, taking copious notes and asking detailed questions. At the end of the meeting, the agents assured them that they would take over the investigation with full force. Jack and Emma were advised to keep a low profile and were offered protection, which they reluctantly accepted, knowing it was necessary for their safety. As they left the meeting, the sky was overcast, mirroring the tumultuous feelings churning within them. They had started this journey hoping to expose a corrupt scheme, but now they were part of a larger battle against a deeply entrenched system. As they parted ways, a sense of foreboding settled over them, both aware that the coming days would test their resolve and courage in ways they had never anticipated. The skies over Chicago remained gray and heavy, reflecting the mood that had settled over Jack and Emma in the days following their meeting with the FBI. They had returned to their respective routines, but the normalcy of daily life felt jarring after the whirlwind they had been through. Each was under protection, a constant reminder of the danger they had exposed themselves to by unraveling the deep-seated corruption. Emma spent her days working on follow-up stories, diving deeper into the implications of the political connections they had uncovered. Her articles helped keep the public informed and engaged, ensuring that the issue remained in the spotlight and that those responsible felt the pressure of continued scrutiny. Jack, on the other hand, found solace in his garden, tending to his plants with more care than ever. The simple act of nurturing life provided him with a much-needed sense of control and peace. However, he kept in close contact with Emma and the FBI, ready to assist further if needed. As they awaited updates, the broader impact of their revelations began to materialize. The FBI's investigation expanded, leading to more arrests and resignations across the city. Policies and oversight committees were being reformed to prevent similar issues in the future. Their efforts had sparked real change, but the journey had taken its toll on both of them. One evening, as Jack was pruning his roses, he received a call from Emma. "They're convening a grand jury," she informed him, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. "They want us to testify. It's the next big step in ensuring everyone involved is held accountable." Jack paused, considering the weight of her words. Testifying would mean reliving the events, putting themselves out there again, vulnerable to public scrutiny and potential retaliation. Yet, it was a necessary step to seal the efforts they had started. "Let's do it," he replied, his decision firm. "It's why we started this, isn't it? To make sure justice is served." Emma agreed, and they discussed their preparation for the testimony. The gravity of the situation was clear, but so was their resolve. They had started as unlikely allies thrown together by circumstance, but they had grown into steadfast partners in a fight for justice. In the days leading up to the grand jury, Jack and Emma met often, going over their documentation and rehearsing their testimony. They were supported by the FBI and their legal team, ensuring they were as prepared as possible. When the day arrived, they entered the courthouse together, a united front against the corruption they had uncovered. The courtroom was filled with journalists, officials, and some of the very people they had exposed, their faces tense with anxiety. Jack and Emma took the stand one after the other, their testimonies detailed and compelling. They spoke not just about the facts, but about the impact of the corruption on the community and the importance of transparency and accountability. As they walked out of the courthouse, they felt the weight of the past months lift slightly. There was still a long road ahead in the legal battle, but they had done their part to set things in motion. The case continued to unfold, with their testimonies leading to significant developments in the investigation. Jack and Emma continued their collaboration, committed to seeing the case through and to continuing their efforts in investigative journalism and community activism. As they moved forward, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their actions had ignited a spark that would help cleanse a system riddled with deceit. The city of Chicago seemed to hold its breath in the wake of the grand jury testimonies provided by Jack and Emma. The media storm had only intensified, with every news channel and newspaper covering the developments of the corruption scandal that had shaken the city to its core. Jack found himself in the eye of this storm, his newfound role as a whistleblower bringing him notoriety he'd never sought. At his quiet home, he tended to his garden, finding solace in the simple, steady growth of the plants, a stark contrast to the turbulent world beyond his fence. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the decisions that had transformed him from a gardener into a key figure in a major legal battle. Meanwhile, Emma was dealing with her own set of challenges. The professional accolades for her investigative reporting were shadowed by personal attacks and threats from those she had exposed. Despite this, she continued her work with unyielding determination, driven by a commitment to justice and transparency. Together, they prepared for the next phase of the trial, knowing that their roles as key witnesses would put them back in the spotlight, subjecting them to cross-examinations and public scrutiny. They met regularly, reviewing documents and testimonies, supported by a team of FBI agents and legal advisors who were committed to building a strong case against the accused. As the trial date approached, the atmosphere in the city was charged. The public's demand for accountability had grown louder, with civic groups and activists rallying, inspired by Jack and Emma's courage. The community was engaged in a way that hadn't been seen in years, reflecting a collective desire for reform and justice. On the first day of the trial, the courthouse was surrounded by media and protesters, the air thick with anticipation and the weight of consequential decisions. Inside, the courtroom was packed, the gallery filled with journalists, activists, and citizens who had followed the case closely. Jack and Emma arrived together, their faces set with resolve. They were greeted by their legal team, who briefed them on the day's strategy. The prosecution's opening statements were powerful, outlining the depth of the corruption and its impact on the city's most vulnerable populations. When it was time for Jack to take the stand, he walked with steady steps to the witness box, his heart beating with a mix of nerves and determination. He testified about his discovery of the financial discrepancies, the initial investigation, and the evidence they had gathered. His testimony was clear and factual, yet his passion for justice resonated in the courtroom. Emma's turn came next. She detailed her investigative process, how she had followed leads and uncovered connections that painted a broader picture of the corruption scheme. Her expertise as a journalist shone through, her commitment to uncovering the truth evident in every answer she gave. The defendant's attorneys were aggressive, attempting to discredit Jack and Emma's findings and question their motives. However, the evidence was too compelling, and their testimonies too robust to be shaken. As the day concluded, Jack and Emma felt a cautious optimism. They had done everything they could to present a clear and truthful account. As they left the courthouse, they were met with cheers from the crowd, a humbling reminder of the public's support. The trial continued, with each day bringing new revelations and testimonies that only added to the prosecution's case. Jack and Emma were not just witnesses, but symbols of the fight against corruption, their actions inspiring others to speak out and stand up for justice. As the trial progressed, the prosecution unfolded layers of deceit that had entangled not just the charity organization, but extended into local government and business entities. Jack and Emma attended every session, their presence a constant reminder of the citizens' role in governmental oversight. During a particularly intense day in court, a key witness, a former associate of Michael Thompson, testified, corroborating much of what Jack had discovered and what Emma had reported. This testimony proved pivotal, revealing the methods used to launder money through the charity and implicating several high-profile city officials in the process. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom and across the city. People were outraged and demanded further accountability. The trial was no longer just a legal proceeding. It had sparked a broader movement for transparency and reform in how charities and city contracts were managed. Outside the courthouse, Emma spoke to the gathered media, her role as both a journalist and a key figure in the case, placing her at the center of the narrative. She discussed the implications of the revelations and the importance of public vigilance in holding leaders accountable. Her words were broadcast live, resonating with viewers and strengthening public support for systemic change. Meanwhile, Jack dealt with personal repercussions. His identity as a whistleblower had made him a target for both support and criticism. Some local businesses and individuals, grateful for his courage, offered support and protection, while others, skeptical or aligned with the accused, shunned him. Despite the mixed reactions, Jack remained committed to his garden and his community, his resolve only strengthened by the trial's developments. As the trial neared its conclusion, the defense's attempts to undermine Jack and Emma's credibility and the solidity of the evidence faltered under the weight of the proof presented by the prosecution. The once confident demeanor of Michael Thompson and his co-defendants had eroded, replaced by a growing realization of the inevitable. The final day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed with anticipatory energy. When the jury returned after deliberation, the silence was palpable. Guilty verdicts were handed down across the board, a sweeping affirmation of the case built by Jack, Emma, and the legal team. The judge delivered a stern sentence, emphasizing the betrayal of public trust and the need for stringent consequences. The verdict was a landmark moment for the city of Chicago. It marked a significant victory in the fight against corruption, setting a precedent for how similar cases might be handled in the future. For Jack and Emma, it was both a professional triumph and a profound personal journey that had changed them indelibly. In the aftermath of the trial, Emma wrote a series of reflective articles on the entire ordeal, analyzing the events and their larger implications. Her work earned her accolades and solidified her reputation as a formidable investigative journalist committed to truth and justice. Jack C., on the other hand, used his experience to foster community engagement. He started workshops and talks on civic responsibility and transparency, using his garden as a metaphor for growth, care, and community involvement. His grassroots approach helped sow seeds of awareness and engagement among his neighbors and fellow citizens. As they moved forward from the trial, both Jack and Emma remained vigilant and active in their pursuits. The changes they had helped catalyze were just beginning to take root, and they were committed to nurturing this progress, ensuring that the hard lessons learned would not be forgotten. In the weeks following the trial, the city of Chicago experienced a palpable shift. The successful prosecution of such a high-profile corruption case had a ripple effect, influencing various sectors to reevaluate and strengthen their ethical guidelines and oversight procedures. Jack and Emma's roles in this transformation had made them local heroes to many, symbols of what concerned citizens empowered by truth could achieve. Jack continued to find peace and fulfillment in his gardening, but his activities had expanded. He now hosted community groups in his garden, teaching not only about horticulture, but also about civic responsibility. His story inspired others, showing that individual actions have power and that integrity can affect change even in the face of daunting corruption. Emma, for her part, found her professional calling invigorated by the events she helped unfold. She became a sought-after speaker on investigative journalism and ethics, traveling to conferences and universities to speak about her experiences and the critical role of the press in maintaining democracy. Her articles and books on the case study became essential reading for budding journalists and seasoned professionals alike. As life settled into a new normal, Jack and Emma took time to reflect on their journey. They met regularly, their sessions evolving from strategy meetings into discussions about their ongoing projects and initiatives. They both felt a profound commitment to continue their work, albeit in their individual capacities. For Jack, the garden remained his sanctuary and his way of connecting with the world. He started a non-profit organization focused on urban gardening and community development, using his newfound public platform to advocate for green spaces and environmental stewardship in urban planning. His initiatives brought him into collaboration with city officials, a testament to his belief in the possibility of positive change within the system. Emma leveraged her experience into furthering her career in investigative journalism. She took on a role as an editor at a major national newspaper, where she established a new section dedicated to investigative reports on corruption and transparency. Her leadership inspired a new generation of journalists, and her commitment to uncovering the truth continued to make waves nationally. Both Jack and Emma often looked back on their experiences with a mix of disbelief and pride. They had been thrust into the whirlwind of a major corruption scandal, faced personal and professional threats, and emerged not only unscathed, but empowered. The lessons they learned were numerous: the importance of perseverance, the power of collaboration, and the impact of standing up for what is right. They shared these lessons in talks and workshops, contributing their insights to a broader discourse on ethics and accountability. Their story became a case study in civic education curriculums, taught as an example of how ordinary citizens can make an extraordinary difference. It also served as a reminder of the vulnerabilities in systems that lack transparency and the constant vigilance required to maintain integrity in public and private sectors. The long-term impact of their actions was profound. The reforms initiated as a result of their investigation had a lasting effect on how charities and public contracts were managed in Chicago and beyond. The case spurred similar investigations in other cities, leading to a national movement for more stringent controls and transparency in public funding and donations. Jack and Emma remained humble about their role in these changes, always emphasizing the collective effort involved. Their story inspired numerous others to take an active interest in governance and community affairs, proving that change is possible when individuals dare to challenge the status quo. As they moved forward, Jack and Emma continued to be guided by the principles that had brought them together: truth, justice, and the belief in the power of individual action to inspire collective change. They maintained their friendship, bound by a deep respect for each other's strengths and a shared history that had changed their lives forever. Their journey reminded everyone who knew their story that while the fight for integrity is never easy, it is always worth the effort. And in their quiet moments, looking at the thriving gardens or the headlines of new exposés, Jack and Emma could feel genuinely proud of the part they played in fostering a more transparent, accountable society. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing to our channel and supporting us through the thanks button.